Tonight, the private family funeral of George Floyd.
That at a moment when he called out for his mama, we believe that the ears of mamas across this nation reared up.
Civil rights leaders remember the man whose death sparked a worldwide movement. And it's official, the United States is in recession. How long will it last? Plus, the fight for religious freedom in Syria heads to Capitol Hill. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The family of George Floyd's final goodbye. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Bratter. Thank you for joining us. His death caused an uprising in America, and today George Floyd was laid to rest.
After a third memorial concluding with his funeral service today, he was buried next to his mother in a cemetery near Houston.
CBN National Security Correspondent Erik is following this story for us and begins our coverage. Erik, George Floyd's funeral marks an end for some, but for a lot of people, it's really the beginning of a greater movement.
Yeah, Jenna and John, that's exactly right. And today, the mayor of Houston declared today George Perry Floyd Day. And those who gathered to say goodbye underscored the fact that his death will continue to impact many days to come.
In the tradition of the African American church, this will be a homegoing celebration.
Even though there were tears shed, the final service for 46-year-old George Floyd was designed to be uplifting. There were several messages of comfort and strength for the Floyd family.
We are praying for you. We are interceding on your behalf and want each of you to know that our love extends to you from Houston to all parts of the world.
We thank you for the life of George Floyd, oh God, that at a moment when he called out for his mama, we believe that the ears of mamas across this nation reared up, that the ears of mamas across this world heard him cry, even though for one mama, all mamas began to wail.
Presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden delivered words via video with a special message for Floyd's young daughter, Gianna.
You're so brave. Daddy's looking down. He's so proud of you. The countless hours he spent playing any game you wanted because your smile, your laugh, your love is the only thing that mattered at the moment.
Several speakers said George Floyd was on an assignment as a change agent, and those left behind have an assignment too.
We have a responsibility to each one of them to make sure that we do not walk away today after having celebrated his life and not taken the next step to commemorate and to assure the future generations that this won't happen again.
And the purpose will mean there will be no more 8 minutes and 46 seconds of police brutality.
The family shared emotional remarks.
Tim, I love you, and I thank God for giving me my own personal Superman.
I hear people talk about what happened to George Floyd like there was something less than a crime. This was not just a tragedy. It was a crime.
We honor him, Reverend Sharpton, not because he was perfect, but we honor him today because when he took his last breath, the rest of us will now be able to breathe.
And during today's funeral, the mayor of Houston announced that he is signing an executive order that will ban chokeholds and strangleholds within the police department in his city. John and Jenna.
All right, Erik, thank you very much. And for more, we are joined by Jack Jenkins of Religion News Service. Jack, good to have you this evening. The George Floyd killing has really sparked something across the country and the world for that matter. How are people of faith responding?
Right. So the killing of George Floyd has really responded with a multitude of faith-based outrage. You've seen evangelical leaders condemn it as a terrible tragedy. There was even a group of evangelicals in Washington, D.C., around 1,000 to 2,000 of them who are marching over the weekend, holding signs that read Black Lives Matter and singing Amazing Grace. You have also seen more progressive faith leaders who've been participating in some of the protests really early on. You've had clergy who are on the front lines of demonstrations in Ohio or in Minneapolis. In fact, very early on in Minneapolis, you had churches who were offering up their sanctuaries as spaces of safety and refuge for demonstrators in that city. And you've seen that replicated throughout the United States and here in Washington, D.C.
Jack, it's unrelated, but on another prominent evangelical leader, Jerry Falwell Jr., the president of Liberty University, a strong Trump supporter, backtracked from a racially insensitive tweet that actually caused major backlash. What's he saying now about that tweet, and what brought that on?
Right. So Jerry Falwell Jr. tweeted out an image of, saying that he would only wear masks in the midst of this pandemic if it included an image of Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia, in blackface, referencing a scandal that almost unseated that Democrat from office. But the response to that tweet was pretty swift at Liberty University. You had multiple Black members of staff, including the diversity retention director, resign in protest as a response to that. And 36 African-American alumni actually signed onto a letter expressing deep displeasure with Falwell's tweet and saying that they weren't going to support the university anymore and weren't going to fund it any longer. And it has ultimately resulted in Falwell issuing an apology, which is actually relatively rare for Falwell, who has often made inflammatory comments that garnered significant media attention. Those alumni are still seeking a meeting with Falwell to resolve this issue further, but he did, in fact, apologize.
Yeah, rare indeed. So, Jack, we've seen, as you mentioned, a lot of faith leaders and just people protesting, calling on the president also to do more to end systematic racism. What about, though, the president's evangelical base?
Right. This has been an interesting question. In fact, white evangelicals in particular have been this mainstay of support for Trump throughout his presidency. But in the last few weeks, according to the Public Religion Research Institute, his support among that demographic has dropped as much as 15 points. Many are unhappy with the way that he has handled the response to the George Floyd demonstrations. I mean, I think one of the biggest flashpoints was the clearing of Lafayette Park here in Washington, D.C., of demonstrators, and also the expulsion of clergy from St. John's Church, where the president then showed up a few minutes later and held up a Bible as part of a photo op. And those sorts of movements have seemed to have led to a lot of not only disenchantment among people in faith with Trump, but also including white evangelical Protestants. Now, to be clear, he still enjoys majority support with that group. But given how narrow his margins were in 2016, he doesn't have a lot of support to lose.
Yeah. All right, Jack Jenkins with Religion News Service. We have to leave it there, but it's good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Jack. Well, it is official. The coronavirus lockdowns pushed the United States into a recession, ending the longest economic expansion streak since the Civil War. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us now. Ben, what's the prognosis here? What are experts saying about how long the recession could last?
Well, John, turns out some economists believe the country may have already exited the recession or could possibly be on its way out. In the meantime, as you've been reporting, the unemployment numbers do remain high in the past few months.
National research shows the economy began its turn for the worse back in February, ending an expansion that lasted more than 10 years. The Labor Department reports 11.5 million layoffs in March, then 7.7 million more in April. Add to that, energy company BP just announced it will eliminate 10,000 jobs, a cut of about 14% of its global workforce. The move comes after crude oil prices hit their lowest level in decades. Still, President Trump is optimistic following the May jobs rebound of 2.5 million jobs added, tweeting, "I built the greatest economy in the world, the best in the U.S. has ever had. I am doing it again." 2020 contender Joe Biden pushed back, writing, "Trump squandered a growing economy." How fast the nation bounces back could depend on how states ease restrictions. Currently, all 50 states are in some phase of reopening. On Monday, some 400,000 people went back to work in New York City.
It is the day that we start to liberate ourselves from this disease the day we move forward.
Now, Federal Reserve officials met today and will announce their latest monetary policy decision tomorrow. And in 2020, so far, the deficit is nearing $2 trillion. And some economists even believe that number could possibly double by the end of the year. John, Jenna?
Thank you, Ben. And here now for more, author, economist, and independent advisor to President Trump, Stephen Moore. Hi, Steve. So do you agree? Are we, exiting the recession, or do you think it's still too early to tell?
Well, we sure did get a blockbuster jobs report on Friday. There's no question about that. And boy, was that good news when we most needed it, given the havoc and chaos of the last, 3 months. But we're not out of the woods yet. Look, we lost 20-some million, maybe as many as 30 million jobs over the last few months. So obviously, we've got a lot of work to do to get those jobs back. It was such a welcome relief to see 3 million private sector jobs created in the month of May. No one expected that. So I believe we're running about 2 months ahead of time. In other words, I thought we'd see that kind of jobs report maybe in July, not for May. So I'm feeling pretty good about things. And you guys did a very good analysis that what matters most is getting these states open for businesses, because as we've seen in Florida and Texas and Tennessee and Georgia and so many of these red states with Republican governors, that once they open up their businesses, people come back to the stores, people come back to work, and revenue starts flowing again. So it's a good start.
Steve, what exactly, you kind of hit on it, the states reopening, but how much of the rebound is predicated on, or does it even take into account the potential for a resurgence of the coronavirus that could cause even more disruption?
Well, obviously, that's the nightmare scenario, and we certainly don't want to see, for health reasons, we don't want to see a second recurrence of coronavirus. But we know so much more about this than we did 3 months ago. For example, we would never, hopefully, the politicians wouldn't be dumb enough to actually shut down our economy again. We know that, for example, the thing you have to do if you get a recurrence of this is you have to keep the nursing homes safe. You have to keep people with, pre-existing conditions in a quarantine so that they don't get sick, because they're very vulnerable. But young people are not vulnerable to this disease. And we found out something else really important this week, that it appears now that people who are asymptomatic, that is people who don't show any signs of the disease, are not contagious, or at least in most cases. So that means that there isn't, if you take a person's temperature before they go in a store, or before they go back on the job in the office, you're keeping people safe. We cannot withstand another shutdown of the economy, and I guarantee you that's the last thing Donald Trump wants to have happen.
Well, speaking of President Trump, he touts the economy as one of his biggest accomplishments, Steve. How much is his re-election in November tied to the economy if we're still not recovered by that point?
Well, we're not going to be fully recovered, let me guarantee you, by November. It's going to take a good year to recover from the damage that we've done by putting our economy into a state of paralysis for so many months, because a lot of these small businesses, it's just tragic. A lot of them went bankrupt, and they're not going to come back. And I think retail is going to face a tough time. Airlines are going to face a tough time before people start, flying again. So it's going to be, I think, a long, slow recovery. But Donald Trump has to convince the American people that he's got the American economy on the right track. And I think the big issue for the election in November 2020 is the answer to this question. Do you believe that Donald J. Trump or Joe Biden is ever better able to guide us back into prosperity? And I think you guys know my answer to that question.
I think so. Stephen Moore, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay. Have a great week, guys.
You too. Protecting religious freedom in Syria. Coming up, how the fight to keep Kurds safe is heading to Capitol Hill.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
It's about the competition. I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, you know, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Welcome back. After enduring the terror of ISIS, Christians in northeast Syria now face religious persecution under the occupation of Turkish forces that invaded after President Trump pulled U.S. troops out of the region.
And tomorrow, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom will hold a hearing on how to restore their freedoms. CBN's Jennifer Wishon has more.
You know, northeast Syria is home to ancient Christian communities along with Yazidis and Muslims who live together in peace when allowed to govern themselves. But their way of life and even existence is under constant threat. I'm joined by USERF Commissioner Nadine Mayenza, who's working to garner U.S. support in the region. Commissioner Mayenza, give us a sense of what northeast Syria has been through over the past few years.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Jennifer. You know, northeast Syria is a place that has dealt with ISIS, a civil war, and most recently Turkey's invasion. And so they've been through a whole lot. I think that, you know, we have been so impressed at USERF with the conditions that they have provided for religious freedom and the tolerance that they've provided. It's the best religious freedom conditions in the Middle East. And so when last November, when Turkey entered, when Turkey enters, they've entered now 3 times into area governed by the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria. And each time they've entered, they have come in and governed by taking away religious freedom and instituting really harsh Islamic ideology that goes against the religious freedom that the Autonomous Administration has been supporting in the region. And it's been a disappointment for the U.S. Commission to watch.
So you say Turkey has come in 3 times and they take over this autonomous government. What does that look like?
The one area in Afrin in particular where Turkey invaded first, they demolished, and just recently, in fact, in the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of stories about them demolishing religious sites and even kidnapping Yazidi and Kurdish women and selling them into slavery. So some of the same crimes that ISIS had committed, Turkey has come in and it continued those same sort of atrocities.
Wow, it's hard to believe or even imagine what this part of the world has been through. It's interesting to me that when they're allowed to govern themselves, that religious freedom flourishes.
And it's really an extraordinary thing. You can't make people care about each other. You can't go into a country and make them follow the values that you think would be good for them. And you look at places like Afghanistan that we're leaving, we were never able to institute the kind of changes we hoped would happen. And here, there's a place where they're doing it on their own. This area is really one of the keys to saving Christianity in this region. And for them to be able to stay secure and stable really secures that one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, they still have Aramaic spoken in their church services. It's really quite beautiful.
Is this particular situation made even more difficult because Turkey is an American ally?
Quite a bit. But it's also one of the more important times that we stand up and call out just call out the facts, which in Northeast Syria, the U.S. policy, if it changes, could enable them to continue with their successful government and continue to protect religious freedom and protect Christians and Yazidis and others. But if they fall because Turkey invades, and then Russia, I know is been mentioned as somebody that wants the oil fields, and Iran is on the ground there, and you have the Assad troops, you have all of these powers that would like Northeast Syria to fall. And if that was to happen, the consequence for religions, religious freedom, in particular Christians, Yazidis, would be enormous.
Commissioner Mayenza, thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Jennifer. And meanwhile, North Korea says it stopped all communication with South Korea. The severed lines of dialogue come after the recent rise of power of Kim Yo-jong, the chairman, the sister of Kim Jong-un. She reportedly ordered the move as payback for North Korean defectors who used balloons to float anti-Pyongyang leaflets back across the border. Lawmakers in Seoul have already said they'd push up for a ban on leaflets. So many experts believe Pyongyang is just using the cut in communications to make South Korea agree to concessions in policy discussions.
Well, coming up, a decision that could change the way high school sports are played in states like Connecticut. More on that story when Faith Nation returns.
Daddy?
Yeah, buddy?
How many nickels are in a dollar?
There are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain. Get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
And welcome back. President Trump is planning to hit the road again with his campaign organizing Make America Great Again rallies. They're expected to resume within the next couple of weeks. Past rallies have been filled with Trump supporters, drawing in crowds to hear the president deliver his signature off-script speeches. The campaign says it's still working out details on how they will address social distancing.
Well, Connecticut's Education Department has issued a major decision on transgender athletes. The Office for Civil Rights is ruling against a policy allowing trans athletes to compete in girls' sports. Here's Kaylin Burke with the details.
In Connecticut, biologically female athletes have been denied awards, advancement, and recognition because of a state policy that allows anyone who identifies as female to compete in girls' sports. Now, that could all be about to change.
The U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, which is the agency charged with enforcing Title IX, issued a ruling that stated that the Connecticut policy that allows males to compete in the girls' division violates Title IX.
That ruling is in response to a complaint filed last year by several female track athletes who argued that two transgender female runners have an unfair physical advantage.
I had spent so much time practicing to be able to get my times to where they're at now, and then to know that an athlete that has advantages was going to be able to just blow right past everyone.
Rising junior Alana Smith has had to compete against those two transgender athletes each time she reached the state championship. Attorneys for Alana and two other female athletes argue this basically forces girls to be reduced to spectators in their own sports, which goes against Title IX, a federal law designed to create equal opportunities for women.
We have watched two biological males in the state of Connecticut alone take 15 women's state championship titles that used to be held by 9 different Connecticut girls, which completely undoes the promise of Title IX for female athletes.
This dispute is also the subject of a federal lawsuit. Connecticut is one of 18 states, along with Washington, D.C., that allow transgender high school athletes to compete without restrictions. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
Well, finally tonight, you might not remember because so much has happened in the last year, but it was a little more than a year ago when a fire swept through Paris's iconic Notre Dame Cathedral, destroying much of the historic church.
Yeah, who could forget some of those images? But now work has begun to try and restore it to its former glory. The first step is for workers to begin removing damaged scaffolding that was already in place when the fire broke out. More than 200 tons of metal have to be removed piece by piece. Once all 40,000 pieces of scaffolding are out of the way, engineers will be able to assess if the cathedral is still structurally sound. John, you are so right. It's hard to believe that a whole year has passed since that. Just so much has happened in our world since then.
It is absolutely a remarkable year. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.